The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I just said, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
All right, we're back with none other than 2021 WSL Final Five member and longtime tour stalwart, Sally Fitzgibbons. Sally, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Dave, you can't get rid of me. I'm back. I'm here to stay. I'm pulling up a chair.
Yes. I mean, the podcast is yours if you want it. As I said, you can take it over at the end of this episode. I think it would be the perfect handoff. Unfortunately, we can't reverse that. I can't come anywhere near what you can do on a surfboard, so we're gonna have to just keep it one way. I can be your assistant though.
Good trade.
So what's going on? We had a few events, a couple events in Hawaii, event in Portugal. Are you back home in Australia? And if so, are you at home in Giroa or are you down at Bells already for practice for the upcoming Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach?
I've made it back from the Fast and Furious few months. The adventure was real. And just the climate change was really real. I don't know if you noticed that one. Just Hawaii straight into just Antarctica and just 4 meals. And yeah, I don't know. The thrill of traveling, it just never gets old. Like you set out like this little treasure hunt to get to the stops and get set up and make it homely and be in your best kind of energies, get over the jet lag and just body-wise as well, just be in tune. And the time you get to that heat and pulling on the jersey, I don't know, it's this feel that you're after. And yeah, I think the thrill of trying to find that never gets old. So I did. I came all the way back home. I've been to and from Bells already just to reignite the flame, just say hello. And it's been a few years because of COVID and that place is so beautiful. I could definitely live down that part of the world. But yeah, just to, see the waves again and then come home has just been divine. I don't know. It just always gets me, my little burrow, and there's just so much space and empty lineups just to surf by myself. Once you go away on tour, you actually realize that still exists, the solo surf.
I'm sure being on tour is not only do you not get solo surfs, but you don't even get just surfs with civilians. You get them with the world's best surfers. And it's probably one of those things where it's like, yes, I feel motivated to stay very sharp in terms of how I surf, but holy crap, it's like it's a bunch of alpha predators in the same sort of ecosystem, and I'm sure getting waves is a challenge.
That is so true. How many do you think, like 50 World Tour surfers equals, really, in actual surfers?
It's a good question, right? Because, I mean, thank you to LinkedIn. I just got my reminder for how old I am. So I'm into my 17th year with the company. But I remember when I started and we were traveling a ton and all my friends were like, oh my God, you must get like the best waves ever. And it's like, yes, but also think of it like this. If the waves are good, we're definitely working. And if they're not good, then yes, maybe I'm surfing, but also I'm only getting scraps, even maybe like scraps off the scraps because of like, as you pointed out, it's like 50 CT surfers in a lineup is probably the equivalent of like, I don't know, 10,000 civilians. It's very crowded in my opinion.
Yeah, I've definitely stopped paddling when certain surfers start paddling. Like they start like 20 meters further out and I just fold my arms and I'm like, they're totally getting this wave. And no joke, it's like watching just a speedboat come at you. And then the wake like knocks you off your board because they're paddling so fast. And I was like, I told you, they never miss a wave. It's really hard to get waves.
I think it's completely like altered my psychology as a surfer where all I do, even when I'm not traveling for the tour, like surfing at my local, like I'm just here for the scraps. Like, like I don't even like, I've surfed here my whole life. I should be out the back getting sets. But in my brain, I'm like, you're going to be waiting forever. You don't have that much time. Just go inside. And then being on tour too, like in the event that you paddle out at one of those spots and try to, I think if you're on tour or even if you're there to watch, it's always polite to let the people who are competing for points and money and like the world title to like obviously get your waves. So if we're like lowers or something and I'm like, I'm just going to sit on the inside corner left. But the second one of the CT surfers moves into like the scrap zone, I'm like, hey, No. You're out the back. Like, do you stay off my little bit?
No, that's
here,
what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Do you ever look left or right that I'm sitting right next to you?
Yeah. But I mean, there's certain people, like, it's, I mean, CT surfers are human beings. It's the same as being out there with like anybody. Like, you could connect with someone else and be like, okay, we're going to split this. This is fine. We're going to work together. It's all good. And so I think if I surf with you, I'm never in the way. I feel like we only work together, which is always nice.
I always, once I drive out of home, I just do the like rest in peace catching waves. I don't actually go on tour to catch waves. I go to like admire like a real life surf movie, and then I catch my scraps, and then I'm like, because it's a real thing, like after you battle with like the local posse of people trying to be like, this is still our wave, and then, 50 of the best, and I just kind of, sometimes you don't want to give away all your energy to that battle because it's not really the battle I came for. It's not my story. So I just kind of work on my, positive psyche on the inside scrap. So it's really the place to be. Like, there's really good vibes in there.
I love it. Well, you know what? Before we get into the 2022 season, the first time you came on the podcast was actually just about a year ago. It was last April. And that CT season had yet to unfold, and we covered so much great stuff in that episode. For those who haven't listened to it, like, go check it out for sure, because we're not going to talk about all the same stuff. But one of your goals was to make the Rip Curl WSL Finals at Lower Trestles, which you did. And so before we kind of move into this season, I want to kind of go back and just get how do you feel about that event, I guess, through the prism of looking back through a few months? Like, I thought you surfed very, very well. But yeah, how did it go for you on the day? What did you think about the format? And what did you take away, I guess, sort of personally and professionally from that experience of competing for a world title that was definitely going down on a single day?
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity just to look back and reflect, because it goes so fast. Like, a lot of people kind of like look in on the experience and they're just like, oh, that must be so fun enjoying this whole experience. But you don't really get to enjoy it when you're in it so much, if that makes sense, because there's so much to get ready logistically and get to the start line, to get there healthy, because we were still traversing through COVID. We still are. And so to reach that goal, I was really proud to get to the start line, to get to the very first like finals 5, especially being like a part of the first like Olympic class as well. There were 2 huge milestones of mine, and they happened in the same year. And just getting to the start line, and I feel like the day itself was like, always comes down to this in surfing, but it was like not really as I imagined it in terms of like performance wise, because traditional Trestles is like the few weeks leading up and in training, it's so progressive, and I was having so much fun kind of piecing together a few combinations that I really wanted to back myself and go to the air, and I saw myself kind of in those moments, but we showed up on finals day. We had the false alarm the day before, which really got the energy like kind of surging, because they're like, it's going to be on no matter what. And then that big fog rolled in, and I was like, what? Like, you can actually cancel finals day? And there was all like, you remember the yellow alert and everything? It's like, yellow alert, it's all happening. And then we got there the day it was on, and it was sort of, we woke up and it looked almost like bells, like real rolly. It was kind of foggy still, it was moody. There's kind of these chunky lefts as well and rights. And I think that was the reason for why like some of the performances were maybe a little lackluster and a bit lower than you'd expected. Some were about, they were just a bit so-so. And then some were like really heightened if they got right through the mix and to the end of the day as the waves started cleaning up. I guess I personally felt like I was really proud of my strategic performances, and also like my instincts and adapting to what scenarios I was in and reading like the tempo of my heats. But I did feel as though that I didn't really get that moment, where you get into a big section and you really like sink your teeth, and that like big that's what you're sort of after on a finals day, where you just like open up the wings and your board and body is just sticking to the wave. So I felt maybe as well you only get a couple of opportunities, and if you do pick a bit of a sudsy one or a foamy one, it's kind of took a lot of time to get back to the spot in the lineup. But At the end of the day, when it was all said and done, I was like, seriously, I was one decision away from being in the final matchup, which I was like, whoa, that's like so close. Tati got me in my matchup. She sort of swings the heat a lot on like a mid-ranger one. And so I went that one, but then, there was the 8-pointer behind. I had to sit front row and just watch that thing. And I was like, that's the wave. And so it was a bit to digest. I was like, oh, what could have been, what I could have done, all those things. That takes a while. But at the end of the day, I was like, finishing the year at number 3 spot was a big year for me.
Huge year. And it's interesting. I mean, the thing that I remember kind of digesting on the day and to this day, is just how heightened and crystallized like every moment was for me. And I think it was just one of those things where so much was on the line. You mentioned Tatiana. Like Tatiana was one maneuver away from the world title, right? Like she could have turned the heat against Carissa by finishing that wave. And we've all kind of talked about it a lot, but obviously it wasn't like a difficult maneuver for her. It was one that she'd probably done on that day 10 different times, but just one of those things. And yeah, I mean, it was such an experiment in the sense of we believed that everyone was going to rise to the occasion. We believed it was going to be exciting, and it kind of exceeded a lot of expectations in that regard. So yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting. Another one of the interesting things that came out of that redesign for the tours and competition framework that I want to get your take on is, for the first time, probably since you joined the CT, maybe even longer, you joined the CT in 2009. I'd imagine that your schedule was pretty busy before then too, but for the first time in probably your career, you had a chunk of time after the finals that were in September, before the season started in Hawaii in January, where you weren't required to do any competition. And I want to hear about what you got up to, how you stayed sharp, if you properly let yourself decompress. What was it like for you, and how big of a change did that feel like for you compared to the previous, like really like 15 years?
It was pretty wild, because walking out of that final quarantine, that was like 6 weeks. Well, pretty much the whole year's like isolated and quarantine life. But that final like hard one in Sydney, and I'd run like the, like the belt on the treadmill. I'd run that thing, like the rubber off it. Like it was just like treadmill rubber all over my room. And I was like, that's it. That's the last one. And like almost that freedom feeling and getting home. And it took a while to decompress and just like get the body back on the clock where it woke up by itself. To fully kind of step away from surfing. I've got my 8 to 10 year, probably 10 year renovation cycle of a house. So, jumping into that is stressful and exciting, but really like you only get a little moment, because what was proposed, like the upcoming season, was that you're going to start at like Pipeline, like the most challenging wave in the world. So it's not as if you can just be like, oh, I'll just like cruise for a couple months, and then a week before I'll just get everything organized and head to Hawaii. It's like you think about that like every day. That's what gets you out of bed to go to training. And we have some waves that like are ledgy and slow to kind of prepare you, but nothing really prepares you for how, I don't know. It's just dropping in on the mega ramp of the skatey bowl instead of the little half pipe at your local skate park. It's just like, whoa. And just the energy of that place, of what it requires. So, I love a challenge. That's what I'm here for, to push myself, to go outside my box of where I'm comfortable. But definitely leading up to the start of the season, that's not comfortable or relaxing.
Totally. And it's interesting. I was having this conversation with one of our judges who's here in Ventura the other day, and we were just talking about how the year's unfolded so far, and the topic of how well a lot of the rookies and the newer surfers are doing came up. And we were saying, it's interesting because with the tour redesign, we put some pretty serious waves in those first 5 events. You got Pipeline, Sunset Beach, Super Tubos in the winter, Bells Beach, Margaret River. And initially the thought was, well, they're pretty serious waves, and they probably lend themselves to the surfers who have that kind of experience, to veterans on the CT that are a little bit more primed and ready to take on serious waves and to take on serious waves in competition. But one of the things we were reflecting on that maybe actually helped some of these newer surfers was the fact that the younger surfers never really had that rhythm that surfers like yourself did, in the sense of you started on the CT in 2009, and basically for the last 2 decades before COVID, the CT would start at Snapper Rocks in March and then kind of evolve from there, meaning that your body rhythm was probably attuned to that in a lot of ways. So putting everyone into Pipeline in the middle of winter in January to start the season it's pretty disruptive. And I'm wondering if you've sort of thought about that, or even sort of felt it and sort of reflected on that in the terms of how these first few events have gone, as well as sort of how the rookies are performing as well.
I believe there's definitely pros and cons to the situation. Like, there's always pluses and minuses, and going to a wave like Hawaii, you were just going to someone else's territory, really. Like, we became rookies all over again, let's face it. And you show up there at Pipeline, and probably the pro is that it is the start of a new era for female surfing. Like, to start there at Pipeline, it's never happened before. Like, here we go. Even though you grow up at a wave like Pipeline, if you're ready and you go there mentally and you do some preparation, you're going to be learning on the fly, but there is a chance where heats at Pipeline can really just go one way or the other, even for the best in the business, like, that have been doing it forever. Like, they just may not have the rhythm, or you just could get the wave of your life. Everyone talks about it. Like, you just have to paddle out in that 30 minutes. The lineups are clear, and it's probably your best chance of getting a proper wave out there. And so it can be a day. And that's what I always tell myself. I was like, paddling out when you leave the shore, there is an equal opportunity here to come out as the winner of this heat. Like, the rookies, like, we had a 10-year gap, like this lost time, where, if those events were there over that 10 years, you would say, well, the veterans are going to be in this dominant position. They're going to be favorites for any of these events here. But the actual fact was that the rookies had been competing there for 10 years. Like, it's the opposite to what you think. Like, they have junior events and they train there, they wake up in their own beds, and they're going to do the same thing, but it's a CT now. So really, we had to use all our vet knowledge and experience, even to kind of level the playing field, to go out there and say that we may be, have the upper hand. So it's a really interesting conversation. I feel like no matter where you jump in, it's an opportunity to grow your surfing, to learn something. And in these lineups and iconic waves, it's like everyone talks about, it's really challenging to get a wave. So just to go out there, you're like, I've got a chance to get a wave. And that's the most exciting thing ever. So I'll show up as long as I've got that locker room spot every single time. I don't care if I've competed at the spot or not, and just go out and just give it an Aussie crack. But you were definitely up against some different obstacles, and just starting from maybe the 110 meter mark instead of the 100.
Makes a ton of sense. And I mean, it was such an exciting way to start the season. And, having been involved in the redesign conversations, it was one of those things where, okay, if we're not going to finish the season at Pipeline, really the best places to start off at Pipeline in a lot of ways in terms of excitement. And I felt like both on the men's and the women's side, everyone performed so well, and the waves pumped. And it is one of those things, obviously there's sort of online conversations that happen at every event. But as you pointed out, just sitting there and absorbing how dynamic and shifty and dangerous that lineup is, even when there's not a competition on, is so helpful. I always think about when I was a kid, and it's you're trying to learn how to surf, and you're like, I know I need to get barreled, I need to know to do airs and stuff like that. And then a magazine would come. This is back in the before times. A magazine would come, and you'd see a photo of Derek Ho standing tall in this perfect, draw on your notebook kind of barrel at Pipeline. And you're like, okay, the physics map out. I could stand up on a board. I could stand like that. Why can't I get barreled? And it's just something that even when the internet comes on and webcasts and videos and stuff, it just doesn't translate the same. All the positioning and all the obstacles that go into getting into that kind of Derek Ho position. And it is something that even if you never paddle out there, sitting on the beach for an hour and you're like, holy crap, this whole lineup is like a living entity. It's all shifting together, and the takeoff's moving, and some waves are good and some waves are bad, and holy crap, it's intense.
It's so intense. Like, you don't really figure that, like, that magazine position, that you have to take off about 30 feet deeper than you'll ever be comfortable to take off. And, you know, you're going to be paddling straight down this thing looking at pretty much like, it's just like dry reef when you look down. And then you have to make that thing on the mega ramp. And then you kind of have to like square back up and look. And the tunnel's like, it seems like, oh, I'm on a closeout. But that's like one that's how you get in the magazine position.
Right. And if it's not closing out, you're not getting barreled. That's kind of the thing where you're like, oh, we're safe. And it's like, I didn't get barreled. Okay, great. Like,
oh, I think one of my best surfs when I was over there was pre the competition starting. And even to paddle out was victory, because like the channel was like, it was kind of like, ooh, that's not really a channel anymore. And and so I paddled out with Marksy, with Carolyn, and we were out there, and it was like so scary. You know, if you don't like laugh, you cry, that saying. It's like, we just found it like hilarious that like we're sitting at the back and there was the biggest ones coming, and we're just like, there's no possible way we can get into that. Like with our size boards and our little toothpick boards and just like everything about like the situation and the crowd, obviously. But we're just sitting and we're like, oh my gosh, like go this one, go right. And it was just like the most death looking thing. Like it was just death to go. And it's just like you actually start laughing, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry, because it's really scary.
what's the Kurt Vonnegut Jr., the author, he's got a comment, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he's like, oh, you know, there's two responses to trauma. You can either laugh or you can cry. And I prefer to laugh because there's less cleaning up to do afterwards. And I think that's right. Like, may as well laugh. Like, like what we do it out here.
Yeah.
And so we had 3 events, you know, Pipeline, Sunset Beach, and Super Turbos in Peniche. You got a ninth, and a ninth. Never been in the elimination round. But some of the heats have been slow, and some of them have been decent, but it just haven't been on the other side of that to get to that next round. Competitively, do you feel like you've been in the right space? Do you feel like you haven't been making mistakes? Do you feel like your surfing's all there? It's just one of those things where it's like, it's just a small sample set. And sometimes that happens in surfing where it's like, just haven't moved past that 9th place round.
Dave, how would you feel, you reckon? Like, you go into this situation, like, how would you feel? You're just like, you went in a finals 5, like a minute ago, you put in the same effort and it equaled like a finals 5 thing. And then you go in and the same effort, but it equals like, you got to walk like all the way to the end of the locker room to like the end. Like, yeah, the end, the other end. Like, if you ain't first, you're last. Like, you're actually back there going, oh, it's like the computer crashes and you just lost like a bunch of your work, and you're like, oh, does this mean you have to possibly like pretty potentially start again? And you just go, oh, it was like, I don't know, it is like that series you're watching Netflix series, and you just hope for that. You thought there was like a big crescendo at the end, like this really exciting episode, but it actually turned out to be like the dip, and you're like, oh, where does that go? And it's just got everything in it, and everyone like comes up and goes, oh, how does it feel like? And it's like, well, it doesn't feel like awesome. It's like, no. What's going on? You're like, oh, okay, like you're happy to show up for anything, but when anything does show up at your door, you're like, ooh, okay. Like, I thought I had some problems at the end of finals because I was like, okay, I was one decision away. Some of these decisions could equal a world title, but they're really insignificant when it means like you can't actually vie for the world title if you're not on the tour.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that was my question, right? Because I mean, again, we're dealing with a small sample set, and it's part of the redesign too, right? Where it is all going to be a small sample set before that mid-season cutoff. But I was surprised, like, as you pointed out, you're like, well, I'm ranked 17th right now. It doesn't feel awesome. But you haven't had like a bad event, in my opinion. You just haven't had a good one yet. You know what I mean? And I guess my point is like the heat against Malia at Pipe, I remember it being pretty slow, right? So it's something where it's like, as an athlete, you're like, look, that happens in the ocean sometimes. Sunset heat against India Robinson, like more waves. Like she had a couple of good 7s, and that's the way that goes. And then Peniche similarly with Steph, where it's like, it's a little bit of a slow heat. That's a beach break. That happens. And so I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, certainly not for yourself, but it's one of those things where I can imagine that, again, a WSL Final 5 surfer like yourself has gone, had 3 events, haven't really had like a horrible result, but yeah, I'm up against it here moving into these last 2 ahead of the mid-season cut.
Yeah, sport in general, it's like a high stakes game. Like, if it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. And like you were saying, like a pipe, for sure, every event I showed up to, I was like prepped, like as in fit, firing, like excited, energized, surfing, bought everything ready. And then I guess heats at pipe, I was first heat of the day, still kind of got that like nervous, wobbly energy. And if you're trying to fight, like obviously the aim of the game, you got to get tubed. And so you can't really just like do a couple of turns, then work your way into getting tubes. It was like, no, it's like a bit bigger day. You got to get the one. And then it played out kind of in a sense that like I had an understanding of how to win that heat. And I just sort of maybe won laps and took a wave instead of going and trying to sit underneath Malia. And she got her one on backdoor, and that was it. All the low scoring, like we're only kind of trading 3s and 4s. And then going over to Sunset, it was like I'm really comfortable in the lineup there, but just the overlapping heat style, I've never surfed overlapping there. And I didn't get the rhythm right. I was sort of like in the spot when the heat before me, you know, have priority, and they were in the spot at the same time, and I didn't really kind of react to sitting way underneath them if they missed it. So I was kind of in the spot where I'd normally sit for a heat and in all my lineups, but that just happened. That would mean I was in 3rd priority because it wasn't my priority heat. So India had a great jump on that one. And I was like, okay, I'll move on to Portugal. And I was like, ready, let's go. And then come up against, you know, one of my all-time rivals, like one of the greats in round 3. So for Steph and I, that was like kind of a bit of a do or die. Like we're both needing results and had the momentum and everything. And it just comes down to like a couple of end turns and, you know, either riding out or hitting the sandbar as you're riding out because it's so shallow. And you hit the sandbar and you don't ride out and that's it. And it's sort of like, boom, all done. And so you really just have to enjoy it, I guess, while it lasts because you never figure it's when it becomes really real, when it's like the thing you care about most and the thing you want to do the most, when it's like under threat. You're like, your body tends to like go all cementy and like, and tighten up. And I guess for me, it's like similar to what maybe Ash Barty did at Wimbledon when one of her coaches was saying like, okay, well, you're 5-1 down in the 2nd set. And she's like, well, I may as well start swinging freely because I better be warmed up for the 3rd set. But it just so happened that she started swimming so freely that she ended up winning the 2nd set. Everyone knows how that went down. And won her first like Grand Slam because she was, so just like going up and going, well, it's the same effort, the intent of my surfing, nothing's broken, nothing's really different. It's just a couple of decisions here or there. So for me now, like looking at this situation, that as I said again, there's pluses and minuses, but the big plus is that like it's the same nervous energy you get when you're a rookie and you don't know what's going to happen next because you haven't surfed these events, so you haven't been in that situation. You're going to be up against like the top seeds, like straight off and that's the thing too. So you can't really like surf your way into an event and then open up. It's like I got to come in and start swinging freely against the big heavy hitters and just hope it's my day because there's no real other option. And I guess in a sense, like it's so cool when it's like everything tries is telling you to like tighten up and constrict and like you get to like keep trying to push those limits and say like, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm ready to like put my best surfing down and surf really freely.
I love it. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what lies ahead for Sally Fitzgibbons. We'll be right back. So before we went to break, you were talking about the idea, and I love the Ash Barty reference of swinging freely. And it's so interesting. And I do think that maps pretty well with surfing too. I mean, Kelly had like an entire like movie about letting go, and that was how like letting go of everything is how he freed himself up to actually surf his best, you know. And And I think you see that quite often in surfing too. And it's tricky. I just from the outside observing, I feel like it's tricky to be able to generate that in a real natural and organic way, which seems like the most effective way, as opposed to manufacturing kind of a little bit of, oh, I'm good, I don't care, like I'm just gonna, no pressure, blah blah blah. It's like you could tell with some surfers, like the more they say that, the more they're trying to manufacture that psychology for themselves.
Lying,
and they actually,
Dave,
they're lying. They're liars. They're lying to themselves. And it manifests out in the water.
But smiling.
Oh my God. But I don't blame them, right? Because in their brains, they're like, okay, you're tightening up. You need to manifest like being free. But the more you talk about it, the more you tighten up, kind of thing. Have you thought about that much? And if so, how do you kind of generate organic looseness as you're talking about?
Oh, it's so true. It's called like cement legs, cement body. When you go to do it and you just so much just pressure and the nerves are just like weighing down on you. And it's like everything, pretty much like putting the most California seaweed in your leg rope. Do you know how heavy that is? And yes. Then trying to do a turn and you're just like, it's not going to happen. So it's easier said than done. I feel like there's this moment where it releases you and you have to put in the work though. Like you have to be really honest with yourself and your team. And like you said, like you can lie all you want. Like, oh yeah, this is like exactly where I wanted to be. Like everyone wants to be challenged. Like I'm just so grateful to be here. Like obviously that's all the case, but you care about this. You care deeply about it. Like I wouldn't be showing up after, I don't know, how old am I now? I wouldn't still be showing up like psyched to be there if it's just, I don't know, it's just something that it's an expression after all these years too, like you're surfing too, it's personal. And yeah, so I guess to get back to your question, how do you do that freely? Each person has a different ticker. For me, I probably tick best when I'm really clear on my process. I'm really clear on my plan as well. Like I liked what Jessie said in her podcast with Rosie when she said failure is an option. It is totally an option. Like I failed in the first 3 events. It happened. But it's definitely like they always say what you do next. But as well, like the follow-up Jessie's one, the other best one is like in Tom Brady's documentary when he said that like farmer's proverb, and he's like, when something good happened to him, everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's going to be the best thing for you. And they're like, he's just like, oh, we shall see. And then like the same thing with the worst, like when that worst thing happened and they're like, that's terrible, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, we shall see. Like, yeah. I don't really know where this leads, but I know that the next step, like I'm not done competing. So there's going to be more competitions after Margaret River. Like no matter what the result, like it's like there's snapper, like you either go to G-Land or you go to snapper. So there's a next step. Like it's not the scariest thing in the world. So for me, once I'm like really clear on the plan and that, I still really love competing. It's just that the process, like the result is what seemingly a little bit hard at the moment, but it's like that's not in my control like at all. So totally. I just got to like show up at the next one.
It does. I love that perspective. And I think the farmer's proverb thing is so appropriate for something like that too. It does seem to me, just again, of like being able and having the privilege to kind of observe the world's best surfers for so long and see how they kind of ramp that psychology up ahead of a heat. Observedly, it does seem like it's so much relies upon that first wave sometimes. And it's almost like a bell curve of like, sometimes you see someone like really hammer that first wave and finish it really hard. And if they're successful, it's like all that pressure releases and they're like, cool, I'm in the right space, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you don't, like if you hesitate or you get the seaweed legs or the cement legs and it messes up, you're like, oh man, I got to kind of reset again. And it does feel like a lot of pressure is on that opening ride, even if you're just getting your feet in the wax, because if you're able to execute, you're like, cool, I'm ready for this. I'm surfing to my potential. We're going to Bells Beach. This podcast is being recorded about a week and a half before the event starts. It'll come out a few days before it starts. And then Margaret River, both events where you have a deep history at. both events where you've won, sometimes multiple times. And I guess, kind of what we were talking about before the break, like so much has changed. There's been so much disruption, some by design, but there are some constants, like the Bells Beach event at Easter is a constant and has been a constant since before you and I were born, probably. And that must feel, at least in terms of places where you do have an opportunity to reset, like empowering in a way.
It was pretty cool the other day where I pulled up in the car park. You know where the judges tower normally is? Like the whole setup. You can't even get in that car park. And I pulled up like where the tower normally, like right at the top of the stairs, like in my car. And I haven't done that for like 20 years. And I was like front row, like pole. And I was like, whoa, I haven't done this since I was a kid. And I was sitting there like looking straight at the bowl. And I was just kind of infatuated with like how, many years I've done that pilgrimage, but how at home it is and how entrenched it is in your DNA, like to live this surf journey and compete at these spots. And there's something pretty cool about tradition. But I guess showing up at any of these sports or any tour events now as one of the experienced ones, like as the vets, like if I show up with that, persona that like, oh yeah, I've been here before, this is my stop, like for me, that doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't really get me to that place, that feeling where I've had my ultimate performances. Like I almost go, I have to be as hungry as the rookies are. I have to have the hunger of a rookie, of someone like on the Challenger that's like right there fighting for their last breath, that's never seen tour life and wants that so bad. Like that desperation almost, but in a positive way, like channeled into a calmness. Like I'm here and I have the desire to be here, but when I sit out the bowl, I am going to be like, you have to be just like the calmest demeanor and just kind of link in with what energy's there on the day. Because that play, you can't rush any of these sort of waves. Like it's not a fast and furious beach break. Sometimes it's like 15 minutes between a set in your heat and like similar to a sunset or something, and you just can't make a wave happen. So it's really up to that, but you can just enjoy that atmosphere, that stadium, the people. I miss the Aussie crowds. They're just such a genuine surf fan and I love it. And all the people down there already are counting down. They're like, I can't wait to see like all the best, and they're already walking around in their jerseys. So I purely just want to be there.
How early do you turn up to, let's just say, I mean, I'm sure it varies year to year and event to event, but let's just say the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. How early are you going to leave your little fortress of solitude in Giroa and turn up back at Bells and settle in and get into a rhythm there?
Yeah, having already had some spells down there. So for me, it's just about driving down, relax. We've always driven down. It's about like 10-hour drive. I'm going with my family who haven't been on tour for like a couple of years because of COVID. So that's a real thrill. And yeah, that's the full nostalgic feeling, like just driving down what we call the Hume Highway. And you just like fully just in the country, like vibing, get through Melbourne, get down there, little Airbnb down in Jan Jark. It's just so cool. And not only the surfing, but just for me now, I love my running, just doing the trails out along the cliffs and the buzz in town. It's just going to be such a good week.
So the CT has not come to Bells Beach since it must be 2019, right? Because we didn't go there in 2020. We didn't go there last year. And I want to say that you were not riding Sharp Eye surfboards the last time we competed there. Is that right?
Correct. I was on JS.
JS, thank you. Sharp Eye has had Marcio Zovi's the lead shaper there, has had an unbelievable run with surfers like yourself the last few years. It's such a massive team on both the men's and the women's CT. And Bells is a really unique spot for a lot of the reasons that you've already highlighted. How have you found that the boards have worked there? Are you trying anything different heading into the event? Just generally speaking.
I think it's definitely an interesting landscape in terms of what waves are proposed in the new tour and what waves you're expected to thrive in before this cut. Like they're all open ocean, big, like either big waves and hollow or just chunky. And it's a part of the surfing where we really had a focus on sort of like 3 to 4 foot, like beach break sort of waves for a long time on tour. And it was all about speed and agility and working towards progression and that kind of things, which was more refined boards. And we used to start at like snapper and those kind of waves, which have that more perfect feel. And but once it's just a whole new ball game, I feel like. And so I'm going to definitely have to shift and change and adapt. And I'm going to work on boards and come back to waves like Sunset and have more of a presence like with my equipment. And as my technique grows at waves like Pipeline, that I'm actually having the boards assist me. And it's no different going down to Bells. It's big and lumpy and chunky, and Margaret's as well. And I just want to have that sense of grip as well that you see some of the greats have on, no matter how big the like size of the wall or like how big you want to make your surfing, that just that your equipment allows you to do that. So it is a bit of a never-ending piece of string, I know that. But for me, I think now looking at what the new tour is, I feel like I can grow my surfing, which is exciting from just developing my equipment.
And at Bells Beach, I guess you'd consider three, well, maybe more, but 3 primary competitive zones there, right? You have Rincon, which is just runs along the rocks there. You have the world famous Bells Bowl. And then, the next point up the coast, you have Winky Pop. If you had to, well, actually, let's include it because we run there more often than not. And then when we're in need of waves, we travel to Joanna. If you had to rank those 4 waves in terms of preference for you, in terms of preference for competing, how would you rank them start to finish? What would be your number 1 preference versus your last?
Oh, that's actually trickier than you think, because some of my greatest, so the bowl would be number 1. Like my greatest successes have come at the bowl. You would think you would go for Winky over Rincon, but when the first sort of like 7 years on tour, like we'd never surf Winky. Like we would always be put out at smaller Rincon when it was shifting, because they were less likely to go to Winky. It was only like on a certain weekend and there's all these rules and stuff. So for me, it's kind of like Rincon, I navigated that really well, and it sort of suited my style of surfing and a couple of ways I have around home. So in terms of my surfing performance, like I actually had an advantage at Rincon. So it's sort of like bowl 1, but now that the opportunity that Winky is more regular and I've surfed there a lot more, it's pretty cool when you can get, so it's got a little steeper wall and you can really get some cool, interesting combos. Like whereas the bowl is a little more predictable of what combos people kind of bring out. Right. And it's got the option to kind of go to the air at the end of Winky too. So Winky snuck into 2nd, I reckon, and Rincon's back to 3rd. I've never surfed Joanna. I've only watched that year that that Kelly won there with the broken foot and the alley-oop. Remember that one? Oh, and then they went 1 year to, if it serves me correctly, to Phillip Island to finish. And was it Munro? Was it Trent one?
Yeah, maybe. Trent, and we were joking about he should get like a golden penguin as a trophy or something.
Yeah, that's it. So my memory stands correct. So so that's kind of my order. I know it's a little bit mixed up, but it's just plenty of opportunity and to see different faces of like throughout the contest. Like you're going to get all these different momentum shifts.
It's such an interesting place, and you've touched on it beautifully a few times already, and I want to bring this up with Western Australia too. So many of our events in Australia, but in particular Bells and Margaret River, have such strong ties to the Aboriginal communities there. And I think in particular with Bells, like it's considered one of the song lines, sort of the intersecting grids for the dream walking, which is really, really special. You've won both of those events, as I mentioned. You won Bells back to back, and it's such a being there. I'm just kind of getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But like, it just seems like of all the events on tour, both of these events in particular, because of how much they mean to the communities around there, feel heightened in a way. And you know, you being able to ring the bell back to back as an Australian in front of that crowd, it must be something really special. And I was hoping you could describe a little bit for the listeners of how it does feel.
Oh, it's such a cool spiritual connection. You just feel something. I think when you go around, especially when you're competing and you get picked up on the ski, and often that I'll like fully tune out of the heat while I'm going around on the ski, because I'll come back around and I'll just look at like the cliff line, and you can see all the people dotted along the cliff and everything. And the cliffs are almost like glowing. And I don't know, I just kind of really appreciate the view before I go back into like focusing on what I'm doing in the heat, because I just feel that there's a certain power in connecting to what's there. And I don't know if when you're paddling out and look across the cliff line, it looks like a bird, yeah? The cliff line over its centers, and it has like the mouth and the beak and everything. So everything that reminds me of the place. Even the other day I was staying in an Airbnb kind of cabin out in the bush, and you have your regular alarm clocks, and you just don't even need it, because at like 6:20 all the kookaburras started, and you just like, and it smells of like Aussie bush, and then you race like the kangaroos out. That like, it's a real thing. You think like you're making up some tourist like postcard, but the place is just, yeah, hands down, just so powerful and spiritual and connected. And I'll forever remember that. Like my very first win, it was at Bells. Coming up those stairs, and then getting the indigenous like kind of face paint and everything that happens at the bell ringing ceremony. It was just like, whoa. Like I didn't take that the face paint off till like, gosh, I'm pretty sure I slept in it, because I got home and we went to dinner and everyone said leave it on. I'm known for doing pretty quirky things, like sometimes just leave my rashie on like all the way through dinner and stuff. It's a bit weird, but but that in particular, just getting your face painted, and like you get like one of the Aboriginals give you like a gift, whatever it is on the year, and you just really hold on to those things.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do across these next two Australian events. We got a couple more topics, as well as some listener questions, but we're going to take one more quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, so we've talked about the upcoming Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach. Following that is the Margaret River Pro. Western Australia is a place where I feel like you have an unbelievable track record, specifically at Margaret River. When it came on tour, I've got you 3 thirds back to back, 2013, 2014, 2015, 5th in 2016, a win in 2017, little dip in 2018 with a 9th, but then back to a 3rd in 2019. Last year, you won the Rottnest event, which, while it's not main break Margaret River, is still out west. It seems like you have a really good connection with Western Australia. Describe that for us.
Oh, for sure. It's similar, as we were talking about Bells. It was kind of in the other side of my brain, because if you think of the country, it just perfectly bookends both ends of the coast. Like they have those same raw elements. It's so similar to the south coast of New South Wales, and it's about connecting to like the wave, the culture, the people, your surroundings. And I can go to these spots, and a lot of times people will say, oh, did you go to all the tourist stops, and did you do this, did you do that? And I purely like just have to go and just be in the surf, and like just be in the local town getting my food, and you have the best conversations, and just go for a run off the beaten track, and I'm like so content. Like there's everything I need, just like tops up my tank. And so to go there and compete, I'm just like, that's the bonus, obviously putting on the jersey. But they're all very complex waves and scenarios that you face in the heat. Like there's so much going on. You go to Margaret's, and including that big old rock ledge at the end of the wave that rips your wedgie up every time. Have you ripped wedgies on that rock yet?
Oh yeah, every time.
it's nuts. Like you just fall down crevices and roll along that thing. But you'll do anything, right, to get your extra 0.5. Like you have to go there.
I feel like it is one of those things where everyone's just done the calculus and they're like, well, I got to get through the heat, so like here we go. We're going on the reef.
I think John still, he already had like 18 points and he still like ripped his elbow off, and he's like maybe he just like such in like an adrenaline rush that it's all going to plan. And there's I guess in your surfing you just ultimately at those waves you just go back time and time again, and you're just trying to find that perfect section in the jigsaw puzzle to really just like, oh, there's no better feeling, hey, when you just swing in the bucket of water and no water falls out, you know, when you do the big carve and you just like high speed, because you're pretty far out from spectators at both locations in Australia, but so it's really just this quiet time with you and the wave until you come in and greet everyone. You won, you lost or not, but it's just that kind of embrace that they're like, yeah, how good was that? Like you just experienced something, like you just felt something.
That's so interesting. And I mean, obviously we've all thought of it before, but just what you just commented on with the remoteness of performing at these two waves, you know, compared to, you know, let's see, like a lower Trestles, right? Where you're maybe 50 meters off the rocks and the beach is packed and you can probably hear people, you know, talking into their phones, you know, from the lineup. Compare that to Margaret River, which is way, way out there. And you really are just sort of isolated and remote. Do you feel like those scenarios help you tap into performance in a way compared to maybe just something that's right on the sand or right on the rocks?
Yeah, maybe it's a testament to even through the COVID year. A lot of athletes, as I said, tick differently, and some need the big crowds, but there was no crowds for most part of like all last year, and all these remote locations. Like when I started surfing, obviously from my origins, like I don't show up really, like there's no one down at home that stands on the beach and cheers, or big lineups in the crowd that I'm like hassling with like for waves. It's just more that purist experience. Like I paddle out to have my experience with the wave. Like, yeah, there's opponents and people in jerseys, but really like I don't really mind who I'm competing against. Like I'll just go out there and I really want to seek just that full connection with the wave in that 30 minutes, and hopefully, as I said, some of those feels, like just tap into those and just experience them in a heat. And that's, for me, that's like the ultimate experience. But at waves, I guess, like Margaret River, both in and out of the jersey, I just have really memorable, like almost like bonding moments, like with the waves and my competitors as well. Like sometimes when it's big and you just survive a heat together, you're just like, oh, so glad we both came in like not in pieces after that. Or like I'm free surfing and it was like a really sort of like kind of more average day, and everyone kind of came in, you know how there's a bit of wildlife, and everyone came in and I was just out there by myself, and someone, you know, one of my best mates on tour with Courtney is like, you know how far that paddle is? Like she went all the way in and then saw that I was out there. She's like, oh, I can't leave Fitzy out there by herself. She paddled all the way back out. Like Court paddled all the way back out and just was like, oh, like just let me know when you finish. Like I don't know, I just wanted to make sure, like not leave a soldier behind kind of thing. And she just like waited and caught a couple more waves, and then we came in together. Like things like that I just remember, and I'm like, there's something about this place that allows you to connect to yourself, the wave, and your competitors, but your friends.
I was going to ask you about that. So in that scenario, and then I'll get to my question. Did you know that there had been scary fish alert that had sent some people in? And you're like, I'm fine, I'm going to stay out, or did you just not know? And Courtney paddled back out and was like, hey, did you hear that something swam through here and we all left?
Yeah, well, they didn't even say. Maybe there had been something, but no one said anything on that day.
Right,
like
yeah.
I just paddled out, and everyone just was like, finished their surf, and I was like, oh, I just got out here. I might like. It's so far. Maybe I'll catch a couple. And then she's just gone like, oh, maybe. And there's a similar experience once when I was like, I really want to go experience the box, but there was only a couple of bodyboarders out, and it was because it was a smaller day and they came in. And and for sure, you just like, there was a bit of an alert that day. And so it's just something to be mindful of, and you're like, oh, okay, like it's good to have a buddy system. And But yeah, that was like an unspoken one, and Court was just this really aware, and she was just like, hey, I'm not leaving a mate just by themselves.
I found that in surfing, and even especially I'm being fortunate enough to get to go surf over there a few times. It's so beautiful, but there is like a weird hive mind that takes over the surfers when that happens, because you're like, I think I saw something. I don't want to be the person panicking and saying something. And then other surfers kind of do the same thing, and then they just kind of go in, and then everyone's just like, we think, I don't know, like, and it's like the non-communication. That's right.
No one puts a sign when they drive away.
Yeah, it's wild. But I was going to ask you, because you are notorious for being, wherever we are in the world, first out, like well before dawn most of the time. I try to sneak in sometimes early because that's my window to surf, but I'd never beat you. And I'm wondering, outside of the experience you just detailed, is that on your mind a lot, whether you're warming up for a surf or competing or free surfing at home, just the wildlife component, because it's so unique in surfing. And if it is on your mind, how do you process that in a way where you feel like you can train and perform and get something out of the session? And also, I mean, have you had any other experiences where it's like, oh no, I had to get out of the water kind of thing?
I'll take it to, if I'm talking to my competitor right now, Dave, I'd say take it to my grave. First out, I was out there all day, and I'm always training, never sleeping.
Sure, yeah.
I put it on my tombstone. I was here. No, I definitely feel this day and age, like logic comes into it for sure. Like there's moments when, especially now, because I've transitioned from like Grom energy and body, like I'm aware of as an athlete as I progress, like how to use my energies like appropriately and what I'm going to channel them into. So in terms of waking up early where possible, like it's a great time of the day, but it's not as if now this day and age, like there was a bit of a cross section in generations like there is now. But when I first came on tour, a lot of the older women, they just they didn't serve early at all. Like I was there by myself. I was like, oh my gosh, this is epic. I can just get all the ways I want. And then as it fast forward, then Courtney qualified. She's never gonna not be up early. And then everyone just proceeded to go like, oh, that's the best time. Everyone has to be out there. So I've got a good understanding with Steph on when gentlewoman's hour is, where we where we know when they all go in and we can actually like get a wave and some peace. So in terms of wildlife, I think it's just a feeling, and especially after we experienced Maui, and I was right there like jumping into the water, and where the attack was, like I was paddling from the boat ramp like every day, and that definitely could have been me. So I know it's your time when it's your time, and we're playing in their space, but definitely when there's been heavy rain and there's a lot of fish activity, and it's just good to wait for the skis and know that the WSL have the protocols and stuff so that they're looking out for us. So just being a little smarter in terms of when and what you're trying to achieve.
Makes sense. We talked about this a little bit, and you mentioned, look, like whatever happens in these next two events, I feel like I'm still surfing at an elite level. I still love competing. I'm going to be competing, whether I'm going to Garageagon after Western Australia or I'm going to Snapper Rocks, I'm going to compete. So it sounds like you committed to whatever happens in the next couple of events. You're going to be, working either towards another WSL Finals 5 berth on the championship tour, or working towards requalifying from the Challenger Series for the 2023 championship tour. And we just announced the updated Challenger Series calendar. And, the feedback that I've gotten on the side is that it's great venues, right? In terms of, Snapper Rocks in May could be pumping. We got Manly, we've got, Bolito, US Open, Hossegor, Ericeira. I'm missing some, Haleiwa. The Challenger Series is, as far as qualifying events goes, it's got some really elite level waves, which for someone of your talent probably suits your surfing in a big way.
Yeah, I feel as though my path and my way through this whole journey has set me up to it's almost like weighted perfectly, like to have the perfect amount of pain and struggle and success, and I've got enough evidence to say that on my best day, it can all happen all the way to the top. Like I've been right there to nudge that title and whatnot. So I think when I look at what's proposed, like I just feel there's just so much more in my tank, and competitively what I want to display and get the opportunity to display in my surfing. Until I get to that moment where I don't feel my surfing's relevant, then that's another conversation. But I'm under no illusion as well that you can just like I said, that analogy with Ash Barty, like swinging freely doesn't mean just to try and perform well in these two events. It's like, it's also seeing that these two events are a possible warm up for going to Snapper as well. Like when you meet these Challenger Series pedigree, from what I'm aware and what I've watched and their talent level, it's going to feel like you've got like a pack of, so instead of 18 women, it's going to feel like you've got like, how many is in the drop? Like 64. Right. It's like a triple whammy, like CT, like staring at you that you have to get through. So it almost like it increases the volume as well. It's not as if like you're lowering down to this level that you can just like, oh, the scores just come easily. It's just like, it's there to be like, this is a whole nother layer that sometimes you go into and you can't even get back up to the top because the layer is so high, or I mean the level's so high, or it's just a feat. So I just appreciate all levels and all tiers and the hunger from all the athletes to push this sport. And it is, in the world of women surfing, it's in such a healthy place. And and I think that's when you're in that sweet spot, when you're challenged, but you know deep down that on your best day that you can really stand above the rest.
I think that's right. I think women's surfing in particular is at this inflection point where we are going to start to see a lot more fluidity in terms of elite level talent. I mean, I think that we're at this generational point where we're seeing a younger generation come in, but just also more expansion in terms of more surfers who can compete at that elite level. I think if you look at last year, you look at someone like a Brisa Hennessy who fell off the CT, right, in Mexico, performed on the Challenger Series, got back on, and is now world number one, won her first CT at Sunset Beach. And I just use her as an example because I think that there's going to be a lot more blending between CS surfers and CT surfers, I think, on both the men's and women's side moving forward. But the fact that everyone has like this awesome platform in terms of venues to perform on is only going to kind of, the rising tide will kind of lift all boats in that situation.
Because like 10 people, that's really few people when you think about it. Like imagine in the tennis at the Grand Slams, they're like, okay, 10 people at the Grand Slam, but you make it, and then the rest are just like sent off to challenge away, like on the Challenger Series. Like it's just such a small window, and you just have to respect that. It's really hard to get there, but really hard to stay there. And I think it's just, as well, like you said, it's just a body of work that you can't take on to the next year and say that you've earned something from that. Like there's no hand, you can't just put your hand out and go like, oh, I deserve something because I put the effort in. Like right. Everyone's putting in the effort. Like you just have to kind of like enjoy those memories, but show up again and as, a fresh, clean slate, and just go, oh, I'm ready to start from the start again, which is ultimately, as you carry on through your athletic career, it's harder to digest when you think, I've got to start again, like that's nuts. And then you really go, well, if that's what it takes, then if you're willing to do it, you'll do it.
For sure. You mentioned being a part of the very first Olympics that included surfing. You got to represent Australia. The next Olympics, so I'm going to have to use my notes here, Paris, France in 2024. Rumor is that surfing part will be held in Tahiti, TBD. 2028 is in Los Angeles, TBD on where they're going to hold the surfing event. But in 2032, it'll be the Brisbane Olympics. And so that's 10 years from now. You will be 41, if I'm right, 41.
42, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that you would still be competing at a high enough level to represent Australia in the 2032 games? And if so, what would it mean to you to be able to represent Australia at the next Olympics that is in Australia?
Yeah, so much to digest in that question, Dave. There's,
Yes.
as I said, that pipeline, once you presented with like, even it's so, I guess the whole concept, it's still in its infancy because you still don't really know how qualification works even for Tahiti. And
Sure.
you start to look at the pipeline, and if this year isn't going to plan really, it's like, oh, does that mean next year when you're supposed to qualify, you're not even, because with the Australia team, some of the regions, like they're so stacked that if you're not on that tour in those couple of spots, like up the ladder in the top 5, then it's not really a realistic, like a viable possibility that you're going to be in it. So
Sure.
you sort of put it to the side, and it's one of those, it really is bonus level. Like you're playing pinball and you're just like, oh my gosh, I just shot up into that part of the frame and it hit Olympics, and like I'm going, like, because it is, all the planets have to align. There's only 2 spots. You can't force it if you're not there. You can't like really go, oh, okay, we're going to do this event right before like the ISAs or something, and if that went to plan, because it's different regions, different situations. I'd like to think that I'd be somewhat, just to be involved with the Olympics when they come here would be amazing. I don't know where I'll be in my timeline. Obviously, there's so many young whippersnappers coming through, and that's awesome for Australia. So, but I'll definitely be there in some capacity, like supporting the team. Obviously, to be part of the team would be one of those Kelly feats, being that old. I'd have to call out Steph on this one. I think she did a podcast I was listening to, and she mentioned that she might be 38, and I was like, what birth certificate are you rocking?
For 2032.
in Brisbane. I'd be like, dude, I think you'll be a couple on me. So, yeah, so we'll see. But I think the whole thing's still super exciting. Like even LA is a possibility, but to see where surfing will go in the Olympic realm, and when I'm well down the track, just to see how entrenched it gets, then I just think we'll have a great stable, because we have a great structure coming from Australia that it'll keep providing like a really strong team that will vie for medals. So I'll either be cheering or I'll be in it.
I love it. All right. Well, we've taken up enough of your time with my questions, but we did put it out to the Instagram community, and we got a lot of questions for Sally Fitzgibbons, but we've narrowed it down to 3. First question is from @lul_a_07. And their question is, what is your favorite preheat snack?
Oh, for some reason, like when I get anywhere near a competition, obviously bananas is pretty, I know that's a no-brainer, but like PB&Js or just like peanut butter and banana, for some reason, maybe it's like when I was a kid, something like that. And when you don't even have, you know, when you're in different countries and there's like, you don't even have bread to like make a sandwich or anything.
Right.
You just like cut the banana in half and you just like put it in between, and you just like, oh, well, this will do. And for some reason, that's the best staple, whether you're in Mexico in the desert or like anywhere. You just like, oh, it just settles everything down, and I'm ready to compete.
I like it. It always goes back to the simplest things. I remember reading about like whoever, I forget his name, but like the world's sort of leading ultra distance marathoner, the guys that do like 100, mile marathons and stuff. And he's sponsored by all these guys. He's a very like cerebral dude. And they're like, what do you use? He's like, yeah, I've tried like the gels and stuff, because, these are like hours long races. He goes, but honestly, I just make myself like bean and rice burritos, and I put them in my fanny pack and I just eat them while I'm running. Like that's the best thing. And it's like, it's everything kind of boils back down to the elemental. It's like, yeah, peanut butter and banana, like bean and rice burrito, whatever works. Like,
yeah, you get like the most fancy like solution to everything, and you're just like, oh, I'm pretty happy just with some nut butter and some banana. And then when you run out, like someone in the locker room always has it. Like
right.
if you even
secrets,
if you don't tell them
trade
that
secrets,
you've snuffed something out of their locker.
I like it. All right, the next question is from @Sergio Sangerman, who asks, do you know much about shaping boards, or do you leave that all to the shaper?
Oh, I definitely wish, you have that like bucket list kind of things. You wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I just could speak another language, I could kite surf, I could snowboard, all those things that are still on your bucket list. That's like definitely one of them, that you just could shape your own boards, wake up and be like, oh, I had an idea, like one of the old school crew, and just you were the MR and just went in and just was like, yeah, that's what I was thinking, and you could feel it on a wave. That to me is like experiencing the expression the whole way through, like the whole artistic expression of what we're doing. I can imagine that. You're just like, yeah, I know exactly. Like I can talk in the surfer terms back to shapers, but it's all in like weird expressions, and like, you know, when it's like and it's not like and it's just like and it just was like a bit behind me and I wanted it to be there, and it's like I think to myself, oh, that conversation made no sense, but to me it makes sense, but I wish I could short terms relate that into shaping my own board. So watch this space.
I like it. Shapers are some of my favorite people to talk to. So if you have a shaper, go out and buy them a beer. It's totally worth it. But if you get 1 or 2 beers in them, one of my favorite questions is to be like, who's your favorite team rider and why? And it always boils down to communication. And it's like the answer is never what you expect. It's always someone who they're like, you know what? This person articulates exactly what I need to hear. I put it into the board, it works. And then they're like, my other team rider is just like, I don't even, they hand me notes and I'm like, thanks, I don't need those. I don't know what those say.
Yeah, like the best experience was from last year were some of the bus rides on Rottnest Island, because we had to catch the bus, remember, to go. And it was like, and then you had to walk like 2 kilometers. And when I got on the bus, and Geordie and Jeremy were both on the bus, and you just have the whole way, you're just talking about boards and then like the best conversations you'll ever have. I was just like, oh, this is genius. And the boys are so good with, obviously because Geordie shapes as well. So it's really helpful.
And it's like 3 things too, I've noticed with CT surfers. Like there's a camp where they're like, I know nothing about boards except feel. Don't talk to me about them. I don't even want to know about it. Just, I don't even want to know my dimensions. Just give me the thing that works. Like I want nothing else. And then there's the camp that's like, I know everything about shaping, but I don't have the tactile dexterity to actually do it, you know? And then there's the third camp that's like both, right? They're like, I understand shaping and I actually do it. But they're different skills, right? Being able to understand design, but then also just having the like artistic talent to actually use your hands to craft something. That's just doesn't come naturally to everybody.
Because like Kelly has like the most, I see him as like Yoda, right? But does he shape boards that you know?
I've heard he does, and I've heard he likes it. And it does seem like, just playing armchair psychologist here, it does seem like something he'd really enjoy, because he can get like very obsessive over it, right? But I'd imagine that at the end of the day, like when he has the world's best shapers and literally all of the world's best shapers probably clamoring to build him boards, it boils down to like a cost benefit for time, where he's like, yes, I could spend 2 hours shaping a board for myself, but I can also spend 2 hours doing something else for myself, and I can have all these great shapers build me boards instead. So I think that's probably where he ends up. But yeah, I have heard he can shape, and I think I even heard it back in the day from Al Merrick, where Al's like, when he stops competing, he's going to be a world-class shaper because he's a great shaper.
Yeah. I bet you that's on his bucket list, to surf a board that he shaped in a heap.
I can't believe he hasn't done it already. He's done so much other weird shit. Yeah.
We're challenging him here.
Yeah, that's right. He listens.
On the pod,
He's listener number 1. Yeah. All right. Last question from the Instagram community is from @HarveyNormanAU, who asks, we are all excited to start traveling again, and you, Sally, have an enviable passport. Do you have a favorite location?
Oh, that's like anywhere, everywhere. Like we go on tour, it just gives you just the ultimate sense of adventure and freedom. And and I guess having Harvey Norman on board, like I've actually been more psyched in the last few years to come home, because it hasn't always been an option. So but yeah, Harvey Norman jumped on board, so that's really special. They're supporting grassroots all the way through to a life on our Aussie leg, so that's going to be a thrill for me partnering with them. But yeah, as I think, looking at what's proposed after the Aussie leg, how can you not be excited? It doesn't matter what tour or where you get sent, like out of our WSL community, everyone's just going to be like all over the globe. And so yeah, I literally can't pick. I just like packing the suitcase, seeing where I end up.
We go to some special spaces. I was going to ask you this too, because I thought about it a lot with myself. So, when I started on tour, and certainly before, definitely before, it felt like from a professional surfer standpoint, it was, I'm a professional surfer. I'm going to use my talent to get to travel the world, live my life and experience. And there's all sorts of excess in terms of partying, et cetera, but a lot of experience. And then it kind of felt like there was a window where it became very specialized. I know I did, just working around the tour, where I'm like, no, I don't want to go to the Louvre. Like I want to go to like the southwest of France and surf all day in between work. Like the world's worst tourist, for like the amount of opportunity I had. And then as I got older, I'm like, you know what? Like I'm very fortunate to go where we go. Like, yes, it's great to surf, but it's also good to do other things, even if it's not going to the Louvre, like just experiencing the community. And I was wondering, you mentioned it yourself in terms of going to West Oz and being like, I love going on the trail runs. Do you feel like as you've gotten a little more mature that you've become a little bit better of a traveler in terms of getting, what am I trying to say? Like more diverse experiences out of your trips than maybe just like, I'm here, I surf and that's it?
I think it just so depends on the person, because I go to these places not to be a tourist. I go to live. Like I take my life to these, I set up like the coolest little, wherever it is, like Airbnb, and usually like the hosts I've seen or been back to a few times, and they become a bit like family and stuff. And like just integrating into the local community is like more than enough for me. And I know everyone sort of goes like, oh, but there's so much to see. And maybe there is a 2.0 of travel, but while my focus is to get to the locations, like it's exhausting as well at the same time. So like to get to the start line and be energized, like that whole week lead up kind of takes everything of me to just like settle in. And I'm stoked on, just like you get really stoked on your own program and who you are and what makes you tick as you get older. And so it's not, you don't feel as like, oops, there's all these people traveling, like proper travel. Like, everyone says that. They're like, you're not traveling. You're just like going and doing your normal day. And I was like, maybe my normal day is awesome enough. So like you said, I know the diversity will come through the opportunities and the different, phases I go through, like from athlete to next chapter and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty cool though, because like there's so much to look forward to.
I like it. Well, those are the questions from the Instagram community. Thanks to everyone who writes in at the Lineup Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And while you've done this before, we're going to do it again. Our last segment is the lightning round. 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can. You've heard these before, so it's like taking your driver's test again. We'll see if you match up. We'll see if you do better or worse than last time. First question. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
After our board talk, I still got so much to learn on my thruster. So sticking with the thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Still tea.
You remember. Burrito or pizza?
This one, I was pizza last time because I had prawn pizza for dinner. And then this time I literally woke up and I was like, I'm making these, like one of my favorite chefs was like, had, one of those real things. And he was making this mad burrito. So I'm going burrito. I
like it. Did you say prawn pizza?
Yeah. Have you had prawn pizza?
Yeah. I'm just making sure. I feel like it's a fairly Australian centric thing.
Is it?
And I have a feeling that some of our non-Australian listeners may like take umbrage with it, where it's sort of like people that also don't like pineapple on their pizza. I like them both, but yeah, good choice. Yes. All right, I do. But we're doing burrito. I'm all for it. Okay, last book you read.
It was last night. I read my cookbook, Summer Fit All Year Round, because I made this kind of orange ginger salmon with these soba noodles and greens. So I read that. If I wasn't reading my cookbook and cooking, I would say I'd say just Aussie writers. I try to support our locals. So any Trent Dalton books, like he's just a weapon. Amazing writing. So Trent Dalton.
I like it. Best surf film ever?
Oh, I said Trilogy last time.
Okay.
It's really hard to beat because it's like so nostalgic.
Well, you
I
can
can
go
still
you
remember
go with
all
a
the
seg- a
songs.
seg- oh, same. But why don't you go? What about if you had to pick a segment in Trilogy? If you only watch one before your warm up, what would you watch?
Definitely. You know, Taj's section where he kind of goes like macaronis as well, and then he goes to crumbly. I don't know what the right was, maybe. And he goes and he kind of does like the carb to air kind of combos and stuff, and those like thinners. But I think as well, I was listening to Julian the other day, and it got me all nostalgic, and I went back and I was like watching his Young Gun segments and stuff.
All right.
Yeah, because it was like, I don't know what pod he was talking about on, but yeah, it usually depends on who I've listened to, and then I go and just try and remember and relive that segment because they're so pivotal. How's when you're like doing your shopping or something and you're going down the aisle and then a song comes on and you're like, oh my gosh, that's that segment. You just like, that's like Geordie at Durban or something, and you just like, oh, and you just stop and you just like, that's that song, and everyone around you just like doesn't know what you're talking about.
That's right. I feel like most of my musical tastes have been like the entry point with some surf film, and same with you. I'll be in like a coffee shop and something will come on and I'm like, yep, Stranger Than Fiction, Circuit 2000.
That's so
getting all
weird.
amped and I'm like, where's that song? We're gonna get psyched.
Yeah.
All right. One wave you never have to go back to.
Oh, I don't know what I said last time. Oh no, I remember I said Brazil when that, like, when that river emptied out in
that's still
Baja,
fair.
was it?
Baja to Tijuca. Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Fun wave, but yeah, it was
The wave.
So we're all in that hotel and we all had like an aerial view and you could see the river brown line moving over into like that really beautiful blue water, and it was just like, oh wow.
You're like, no. So anywhere that has like massive rain or brown water, it's so hard to surf like with a clear mind. You're like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Maybe even this would be a controversial one after my last experience. Maybe like pipe when it's like washeries onshore and just like cycle. That is so scary when it's not like even in the spot, and you just like, that's just too much to bear. I'd rather do a run along the beach and watch it.
I don't think that's controversial. Like, I mean, I've had the good fortune of staying in and around that zone enough to where there's been those afternoons, like you've said, where it's like, it's huge, it's washing through, maybe one wave an hour is makeable. And then you still see people who are like, yep, I'm going to spend 8 hours out there today to try to go get one. And I'm like, and I was saying this last winter where I'm like, number one, I could never do that ever. But then number two, it was like, I'm starting to get to that age where I'm like, the amount of time that people commit just to get one or two waves out there is actually more daunting than the wave itself, where I'm like, I don't have 8 hours for that. Like, that's insane.
And they always say, Tess, the specialist, hats off. I tip my hat to the specialist because they always have to walk in and say, it was so fun. And I was like, was it?
We get it. Yeah. All right. If you could only surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dreamcast it. It could be whatever conditions you like every day.
Yeah, dreamcast it.
Yeah.
So this is definitely hitting like, this is not so lightning, is it? I don't even know what my last one was. Something that definitely lefts or rights, barrel at the start, big like wrap combo, and then air section but not onto rocks would be preferable. And the wind swings like halfway through the day so that like the air wind's good on both sides.
Duranbah, it's the best wave in Australia.
Oh, but there's just so many people.
Well, yes, we're dreamcasting. It's just you and me, and we can be on different peaks. It's no problem.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So everyone, no one had discovered it.
Yeah, and Mick's gonna come hunt me down because he constantly gives me shit for like highlighting how good of a wave that is. He's like, stop telling people about that. It's much better than people are supposed to think. And I'm like, all right, fair enough.
Yes, you tripled the people. It's all your fault.
Yeah, I'm like, yes, I'm the one adding people there. Thanks. Okay. Okay, best person to share a lineup with.
Definitely home. My pops, my dad, and my friends at home. It's too good. or just the wildlife at home. I've got like these crazy sea eagles and stuff that come over, and that only come over when I'm in the surf. I never see them any other time. It's kind of bizarre. I got 2 seals and potted dolphins and probably the big fellas too, but we don't talk about it as much.
They don't come around to say hi. It's just the regulars.
Yeah, so home for sure.
Okay. Worst person to share a lineup with?
No. Well, it depends what you're looking for, but if you're looking for a wave, then tour.
Yep.
That's
a
really
standard answer.
Is tour. But if you're looking for a real life surf movie, for sure, come on tour. That's just, it's insane.
Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Already happy after this conversation with Dave on the lineup pod. Stoked. And then next big egg would be driving down the coast with my family to go to Bells, which I've done for 20 odd years. So special.
I love it. Sally Fitzgibbons, thanks for coming back on the lineup. Congratulations on your already incredible career. Looking forward to, you're probably only at the halfway point if you're not even there yet. Looking forward to what you do at the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach coming up on April 10th. Go ring that bell.
Ring a ding ding. Let's go. It's going to be so fun. Thanks for having me, Dave. And we'll see you down there.
Stoked.